Let's move over to this now. A South African doctor who moved to Ukraine in 2011 is now in limbo after escaping the war-torn country a few days ago. He's now in Austria, but only has a few days to legally stay there while he desperately tries to find his way back to South Africa. Charlotte and Johannes joins me now to talk about the last few days. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. You find yourself in a very difficult position. I do know that you had moved to Ukraine, or you've been in Ukraine since 2011, and you've had to now leave because of what's going on there.
Hi there. Yes, I moved out to Ukraine initially, where I started to study. I then was located in Donetsk. And in 2014, the first time around when the war broke out, I then had to move to Odessa, Ukraine, where I finished my studies and completed my specialization, and then moved on to working in Ukraine.
I want us to go into how it was when you decided that you need to now leave Ukraine. What was the situation like, and how did you manage to get out of Ukraine?
To be honest, it felt somehow like deja vu, because it was the second time happening in the country I'd been living in. And initially, I thought that it's just the first day. Luckily, Odessa wasn't really affected by the war as such. Of course, we had sirens going off numerous times. There were nights when we spent almost the whole nights in bomb shelters. But I stayed there for more than a week. And then I decided that when we got more and more threats from the seaside as well as from neighboring cities, I decided to make the journey from the southwestern part of Ukraine all the way to the western part, up to a city called Uzhgorod. And then I crossed the border into Slovakia and moved on to Austria.
Tell us about your current challenges, your immediate concerns, because I do understand that legally, in terms of your documentation, you don't have many days left for you to actually try and get out of Europe.
Okay, so the current situation is at most borders, third-party nationals such as myself, we weren't told anything exactly. The general rule that's being applied is that we're only allowed to legally stay in Europe for 14 days. From the South African embassies, both South African Embassy in Kyiv, as well as all other South African embassies in Europe, which I've been in contact personally, as well as fellow South Africans, we have been told just to go back to South Africa. I've been living in Ukraine for more than half of my life, and no one is able to help us to officially legalize our status here. Many countries are offering us temporary protection, but the terms are not being specified. So we don't know if we are allowed to legally work, whether we'll get deported, or what the case is, because the main focus currently is just on Ukrainian nationals. Of course, we are trying to do this legally because we've also been told that there is the chance that we could get life bans from Europe. So no one wants to overstay their time in Europe, but unfortunately from South Africa's side, both from different embassies, both from all the information that we're getting from South Africa, they're just saying to us, come back home. But the main focus that I've been seeing in the news in South Africa and what different politicians have been saying is the focus is on the students. There are many South African citizens who both have temporary residence or permanent residence, such as myself, who've been living their whole lives in Ukraine and now being told you need to go back to South Africa.
So you are being told to just come back to South Africa, and they are saying that this is the solution for you. But how do you get back here, especially if you might not have the financial means to do so? Have you had any kind of communication with the South African authorities or any kind of assistance?
I personally have contacted the South African Embassy in Kyiv. I've spoken to their ambassador numerous times. I've also spoken to different ambassadors in different countries, and I've been to the South African Embassy here in Vienna in Austria twice. Each of them are saying the same thing. South Africa hasn't taken a clear stance of what is going to be done, and that we should look at ways of getting back to South Africa. I've also been told that in the case that financial assistance would be needed, they could possibly connect me up with different NGOs or people who are willing to sponsor me to get back home. The question that came to mind for me was, what should I do in South Africa if I've been living most of my life in Ukraine, where I studied, where I've been working? I've already twice in my life basically packed up my life into 10, 15 kilograms and fled. The first time was in 2014 in Donetsk, Ukraine, and the same thing happened right now. But my biggest concern is that from South Africa's side, as nationals, we haven't received clear information. On the day that the war broke out, I personally contacted the South African embassy as well as various other embassies, and no clear information was given to us. Telephone calls were not answered. After a few days, I was able to get personal numbers where I made contact, but no clear evacuation. The plans were made for us. We were given information, but to say that we were given clear plans or specific help, I can't say this.
So what are you hoping the South African government does? Like, how are you hoping they help you and assist you, not just you, but the many other nationals that now have had to flee Ukraine and aren't students? Because it's interesting that you mentioned that only students are being assisted, because we do know that Aspen Pharmacare, together with the Department of the DERCO, is assisting students to get out, especially out of neighboring countries. Has that not been communicated to you? Have you not been offered that same kind of assistance?
To be honest, I didn't receive any direct information from DERCO. I personally had to contact them. It's impossible for DERCO to say that they don't have my contact details, because I've been living in Ukraine for so long, and I was contacted directly the first time when war broke out in 2014. I think that this is an unpredictable situation. It's something that no one expected. But the first thing that comes to mind, in my opinion, is a quote of Nelson Mandela when he said, "Real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people." I understand that we are technically free at the moment in Europe, but we don't have much support from South Africa's side. I think this is the opportunity for South Africa to really negotiate at the level above regular citizens, so where politicians as well as other governmental leaders are able to negotiate with certain countries which South Africa has better relationships with, to allow us to stay on legally for this time. I'm not promoting that we permanently immigrate to these countries, not at all, but at least giving South African citizens who have been living in Ukraine for most of their lives, who have been working, the opportunity to at least stay in Europe, because all of us, each South African citizen that I've spoken to that have husbands or wives and children, businesses, jobs in Ukraine, we are all looking at the same thing. We are waiting for the day for the war to stop and to go back to Ukraine and continue our somehow usual lives.
I've run out of time, but I just need to ask you, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do? You only have a few days left. I know you've just mentioned you're hoping to go back to Ukraine, but nobody knows how long this war is going to last for. So what is your plan?
I've been talking to different governmental officials in the Schengen and in the EU area to, as soon as possible, legalize my status, as well as be allowed to possibly work or practice as a doctor, because I do understand at the moment there are many Ukrainian people who need medical care and assistance, and unfortunately they don't speak the local language of the country, and I'm able to speak numerous European languages, so I'll be able to freely work in these countries, knowing both the local language as well as Russian and Ukrainian.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it, and we really wish you all the best. I think that's a massive crisis that millions are facing, where they don't know where to go from here, including South Africans. He's a South African doctor that's been living in Ukraine for years. So